Have you ever questioned whether the world around you is truly real? Is reality something independent of us, or is it shaped by our minds? For centuries, this question has fascinated both scientists and spiritual seekers. While modern physics explores the nature of matter and the universe, the Buddha did not focus on the physical world the way scientists do. Instead, he taught that reality is deeply connected to the mind and our perception. At Light of Buddhism, our mission is to share Buddhist wisdom in a way that helps you apply it to your daily life. In this video, we will explore the Buddha's answer to one of life's greatest mysteries. What is reality? According to Buddhist teachings, reality can be understood on 3 levels. The first is the external material world, which is studied by science, but was not the Buddha's primary concern. The second is the world of the mind, where thoughts, emotions, and perceptions shape our experience. The third is the ultimate reality, which can only be realized through deep insight and meditation. Interestingly, modern physics is now challenging the idea of a fixed, independent reality. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation itself influences what is being observed, aligning closely with Buddhist teachings on how the mind shapes experience. If reality is not as fixed as we assume, then how much of our suffering comes from misunderstanding the nature of existence? By the end of this video, you will discover how understanding reality from a Buddhist perspective can free you from suffering, change how you see the world, and lead to a more peaceful and awakened life. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. The Buddha's perspective on reality. In Buddhism, reality is not what it appears to be. While most people assume that the world exists independently of their minds, the Buddha taught that our perception of reality is shaped by our thoughts, emotions, and mental conditioning. Everything we see, hear, and experience is not an absolute truth, but rather a filtered version of reality, influenced by our beliefs, past experiences, and attachment. This explains why 2 people can witness the same event, yet interpret it in completely different ways, because the mind plays a central role in shaping our experience of the world. One of the core concepts in Buddhism is Maya, or illusion. This does not mean that the external world does not exist, but rather that the way we perceive it is not as objective or fixed as we assume. We do not experience reality directly. Instead, we interpret it through the lens of our thoughts and emotions. Imagine looking at a cloudy sky. One person might feel a sense of calm and reflection, while another might feel sadness and the sky itself has not changed. Yet the experience differs based on the individual's mental state. This simple example reveals how our perception is shaped more by the mind than by external conditions. To explain the nature of reality, the Buddha described 3 levels of existence. The first is the external material world, which is studied by science and made up of physical matter. While it exists, it was not the Buddha's primary focus because understanding it does not lead to liberation from suffering. The second is the world of the mind, where thoughts, perceptions, and emotions arise. This world is impermanent and constantly changing, yet people often mistake it for absolute reality. The third and most profound level is the ultimate reality, which is beyond thoughts and perceptions, and can only be realized through deep meditation and wisdom. A fundamental Buddhist teaching closely related to this is anatta, or non-self. Unlike many spiritual traditions that emphasize the existence of an eternal soul, the Buddha taught that there is no fixed, unchanging self. What we call the self is merely a temporary collection of thoughts, emotions, and experiences, a process rather than a permanent entity. When one fully realizes this truth, the illusion of identity and ego dissolves, leading to a profound sense of peace and freedom. Interestingly, modern quantum physics has begun to challenge traditional notions of a fixed reality. Scientific discoveries suggest that the act of observation influences what is being observed, meaning that reality is not entirely independent, but rather shaped by consciousness. This aligns closely with Buddhist teachings that the mind plays a central role in defining our experience of the world. If we can recognize this, we can begin to question our assumptions, break free from illusions, and move closer to understanding the true nature of existence. The crisis in quantum physics and its link to Buddhism. As we explore the nature of reality, we find an intriguing connection between modern physics and Buddhist wisdom. For centuries, science has attempted to define the fundamental nature of the universe, but recent discoveries in quantum mechanics have challenged traditional assumptions about reality. Just as Buddhism teaches that perception shapes our experience of the world, quantum physics suggests that observation itself influences what is being observed. This raises an important question. Is reality truly independent of the observer, or is it inseparable from consciousness? Classical physics, established by Newton, once provided a clear and predictable model of the universe. It described the world as a mechanistic system where objects exist independently and follow fixed laws of motion. According to this view, matter is made up of solid particles moving through absolute space and time. For nearly 300 years, this perspective dominated scientific thought, reinforcing the belief that the material world is objective and exists regardless of human perception. However, with the rise of quantum mechanics, this certainty began to unravel. Scientists discovered that particles, the very building blocks of matter, do not behave as expected. Instead of existing in fixed states, they appear as waves of probability, meaning that their position and behavior depend on how they are measured. This phenomenon, known as wave-particle duality, suggests that a particle can act as both a wave and a particle depending on the observer. Even more astonishing is the observer effect, which reveals that simply observing a quantum system changes its outcome. This means that reality, at a fundamental level, is not independent of consciousness, but is influenced by observation itself. This discovery mirrors the Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, paticca samuppada, which states that nothing exists independently but arises due to conditions. In the same way that quantum physics suggests reality is shaped by observation, Buddhism teaches that our experience of the world is shaped by our mind and its interactions with external conditions. Just as a quantum particle does not exist in a definite state until observed, reality does not exist as an independent fixed entity, but arises based on perception. Another puzzling quantum phenomenon is quantum entanglement, where two particles remain interconnected even when separated by vast distances. A change in one particle instantaneously affects the other, suggesting a deep level of interconnectedness beyond space and time. Buddhism has long taught that everything in the universe is interconnected, reinforcing the idea that separation is an illusion. As physics continues to grapple with the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, scientists are forced to reconsider whether reality is truly material or if consciousness plays a fundamental role. While science has yet to reach a definitive conclusion, these findings closely align with the Buddhist teachings that reality is not an absolute, independent entity, but a process shaped by conditions, perception, and awareness. What is reality according to Buddhism? As quantum physics continues to challenge the idea of an independent and fixed reality, Buddhist teachings offer a profound perspective. Reality is not a separate, external phenomenon, but a dynamic process shaped by conditions and perception. According to the Buddha, what we experience as reality is not an objective world existing outside of us, but rather a continuous interplay between our senses, consciousness, and external stimuli. Instead of perceiving reality as something pre-existing and unchanging, Buddhism explains that it arises and ceases based on interactions, much like quantum physics suggests that particles exist in probability states until they are observed. In Buddhist philosophy, the nature of reality is understood through the 6 sense bases and their interaction with external objects. Reality does not exist independently. Instead, it is created at the moment of contact between the eye and visual objects, the ear and sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and tastes, the body and tactile sensations, and the mind and mental objects. This interaction generates momentary experiences of consciousness, which arise and disappear instantly. However, most people mistake these temporary perceptions for a fixed and permanent world, leading to attachment, suffering, and illusion. A simple example illustrates this concept. When you taste an apple, you may find it sweet, but another person with a different biological condition might experience it as bitter. If sweetness were an inherent property of the apple, it would be the same for everyone. However, since the taste changes based on perception, it demonstrates that what we experience is not an absolute truth, but a subjective interpretation. Similarly, when looking at a car from a distance, it appears smaller than when seen up close. Yet the car itself has not changed. Only the perception has. These examples reveal that what we call reality is merely an illusion shaped by our senses and mind. Buddhism categorizes all experiences into 3 types of sensations: Vedana, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Every moment of consciousness falls into one of these categories, but none of them last forever. Since reality is constantly arising and ceasing, clinging to any perception as an absolute truth leads to suffering. The Buddha taught that true liberation comes when we see beyond the illusion of a fixed reality, understand impermanence, and free ourselves from attachment. When we realize that reality is fluid, ever-changing, and beyond fixed concepts, we begin to experience life with greater clarity, peace, and freedom. How this understanding can transform our lives. Understanding that reality is not fixed, but rather a continuous interplay of perception and conditions can radically change the way we live, think, and respond to the world. If everything we experience is shaped by our mind, then much of our suffering comes not from external circumstances, but from how we perceive and interpret them. This realization allows us to shift our perspective and develop greater inner peace, flexibility, and resilience in life. One of the most profound benefits of this understanding is freedom from attachment and suffering. In daily life, we often react emotionally to situations, believing them to be inherently good or bad. However, Buddhism teaches that nothing has an absolute nature. Every experience is subjective and dependent on conditions. If we recognize this, we can reduce our suffering by changing how we respond to challenges. For example, if someone insults us, we might immediately feel hurt or angry. But what if we understand that their words are merely sounds that gain meaning only through our interpretation? Instead of reacting with pain, we can observe our emotions with mindfulness and choose a more skillful response. This insight also cultivates mindfulness and awareness, helping us remain present instead of being caught in mental narratives. Instead of being lost in thoughts about the past or anxieties about the future, we can learn to experience life as it is, moment by moment, without unnecessary mental distortions. When we see thoughts and emotions as impermanent, we stop identifying with them, which allows us to live with greater clarity and balance. A practical way to apply this understanding is through meditation. Practices such as Vipassana, insight meditation, help us observe how sensations, thoughts, and emotions arise and fade away. Through meditation, we can see firsthand that everything is temporary and without a fixed self. Another method is mindfulness in daily life, simply being aware of our thoughts and how they shape our experience. When we train ourselves to recognize how perception creates reality, we gain the power to respond to life with wisdom rather than reactivity. Ultimately, seeing reality as an impermanent and conditioned process frees us from unnecessary suffering and attachment. Instead of resisting change, we embrace it. Instead of clinging to false perceptions, we cultivate wisdom. This shift in perspective allows us to live with greater peace, acceptance, and freedom, no longer controlled by illusions but deeply connected to the true nature of existence. Conclusion. Embracing reality with wisdom and awareness. By understanding that reality is not fixed but constantly shaped by perception, we gain a new perspective on life, one that allows us to break free from suffering, attachment, and illusion. The Buddha's teachings reveal that our experiences are not independent truths, but conditioned by our senses, thoughts, and emotions. When we mistake temporary perceptions for an absolute reality, we become trapped in cycles of craving and aversion, leading to unnecessary suffering. However, when we recognize the impermanent and conditioned nature of reality, we develop the wisdom to let go of attachment and respond to life with clarity and peace. One of the most valuable lessons from this understanding is that happiness and suffering are not dictated by external circumstances, but by how we perceive them. By shifting our awareness, we can transform even challenging situations into opportunities for growth. If we realize that every experience is shaped by our mind, we can begin to take responsibility for our inner world instead of blaming external conditions. This allows us to cultivate resilience, compassion, and emotional balance, regardless of the ups and downs of life. To integrate this wisdom into daily life, we must practice mindfulness and self-awareness. Instead of reacting impulsively to situations, we can observe our thoughts and emotions with detachment, understanding that they arise and fade like waves on the ocean. Through meditation, we develop direct insight into the nature of impermanence and non-self, allowing us to navigate life with greater ease and wisdom. The more we train our minds to see reality as a dynamic process rather than a fixed entity, the more freedom we attain. As we conclude this discussion, take a moment to reflect. How has your understanding of reality shaped your experiences? Have you ever found yourself suffering due to misperceiving a situation? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights may inspire others on their journey of self-discovery. If you found this discussion meaningful, consider subscribing to Light of Buddhism for more insights on Buddhist wisdom and personal growth. Remember, true wisdom comes not just from understanding these concepts, but from applying them in daily life. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may your path be filled with clarity, peace, and inner freedom. See you in the next episode.